Welcome to TalentWise, the definitive podcast for CXOs, human resource, and learning and development leaders. This show comes to you from thought leaders who talk about human capital development in today's organization. How to engage and empower today's employee to be effective, competitive, and relevant. Stay with us for an exciting conversation with our guest and learn how to future-proof your team. I'm your host Shubhanjan, founder of KnowledgeBridge. Our guest today is Abhijit Bhaduri, founder Abhijit Bhaduri and Associates.
So I think the style of leadership has evolved a lot thanks to the media, and with everybody having a cell phone, everyone is actually a broadcaster. So the role of the leader, one of the variables that people never had to think about was the media, because your communication was really very, very sanitized. You were communicating largely internally to the employees. And you sort of, it was episodic. You would connect with them periodically, and it was one-sided, maybe, the odd question answer kind of a session, and you were done. And periodically, every quarter, if you're a listed company, you stepped out and spoke to the analysts, and you sort of managed that conversation. But today, again, everything has moved from being episodic to being real time. And therefore, whether it's a customer who can sort of really put a question to you on social media, or you have an employee who might pose a question to you, which is uncomfortable, whether it's on a social site or any of these job sites. So the ability to do social listening, stay relevant, understand what is happening, and be comfortable saying, I don't know. Today, when you are responding in real time and authenticity matters a whole lot, then I think it's expected that if you really don't know the answer, you would say so and then get back.
Abhijit has led teams for Microsoft, Colgate, and PepsiCo across different countries in the world. For 7 years, he was the Chief Learning Officer of Wipro, a $7 billion firm with more than 175,000 employees of more than 90 nationalities across 54 countries. He has written 2 bestsellers, The Digital Tsunami and Don't Hire the Best. LinkedIn voted him as a must-know writer. Forbes calls him one of the most interesting globalists. Abhijit was voted as one of the top 10 learning professionals in the world and the number 1 in Asia. Now, on to this great episode of TalentWise with Abhijit Bhaduri. Abhijit, welcome to TalentWise. I'm delighted to have you here. I've been chasing you for a few months, and I'm glad I could have you participate in the first season.
Thank you very much for having me. It's my privilege to be on your show. Thank you.
As you know, we are talking about future-proofing the team, and the context is that a lot of what we do in terms of human resource management, human resource as a concept is sort of an industrial legacy, according to me. And
Sure.
We are moving away from that into a knowledge creative economy. From your vantage point and with this deep experience that you have had in large organizations and now with your own consultancy, what do you see are the issues that we are facing in terms of future-proofing the team, and where do you see the industry going?
So I think one of the major pieces that is happening in the digital world is that, you're looking at this whole notion of skill building has been something which we are moving away from pretty much a 3-level structure. You learn, then you earn, and you retire. So pretty much if you divide your work, your life into 3 segments, your first segment is your sort of really first 20 odd years, you're learning stuff. You go to college or education or whatever, and then you start earning. You earn for the next 20, 30 years. And then after that, you're looking to retire and sort of, eventually fade out. What's interesting is that what you learned earlier and what you got credentialed in is good enough to last you. At least it used to be good enough to last you, for a very long time. Now, actually, what has happened has been that you can no longer actually continue with the same credentials, and you go through this is, earlier it used to be that the half-life of your skills used to be 5 years, which is that every 5 years you needed to upgrade yourself. Now it has become 2 or 3 years, depending on which skill we are talking about. And we are getting into a place where the nature of the skills is going to be different. I mean, of course, you will need your usual domain skills. You will need to be continuously reinventing yourself there, because work is getting reinvented because of artificial intelligence and all those capabilities. But I think what is also happening is twofold. One is people are living longer, so they will need to sustain themselves financially for a much longer span of time, which means you need to be relevant for a very long span of time. So, the notion of skill is not just really around, finding some kind of work to do, but skill is also, something that's going to give us identity, and it's something that we are looking to keep us going for a much longer span of time. So I think the way you are looking at skilling up a team has to be thought of by a completely different model, and it is not something that you can leave to, let us say, just the learning and development team, because like everything else in the analog world, the digital world has sort of shifted all of that, from whether it's a business model or a talent model or leadership style, or and certainly the digital culture. All these elements are completely different, and what worked in the analog world actually is a disadvantage in this world. So that is really a shift of the way that you're looking at it in your head, and it's really a battle is in the internal world that we are looking at.
So that brings me to that first point you were mentioning. So there are these few things which are the manifestation of this shift that you are talking. And the first one you mentioned was hyperconnectivity.
Yeah, hyperconnectivity actually, changes who does the work for you. Today you can sit anywhere, in any part of the world, and actually you can do the work. But what it also means is that, as individuals, you are actually competing with individuals all over the world, which is, individuals are competing with all these 7 billion people, or at least the people, the 5 billion people who are online in some shape or form. So you're actually competing with everyone, because there's so many sites which can offer to do exactly what you do, regardless of the profession, whether it's lawyer, doctor, consultant, you name it, coder, all of them. There are sites where some gig worker is actually ready to do it at a cheaper price somewhere else in the world. So it is really going to be not about doing something cheaper, but it's going to be about adding value, doing it in a manner which is value added. So that's one part of it. Also, interestingly, the other feature of competition is that individuals have historically only competed with, they've competed with individuals, other individuals. And by and large, it used to be that you competed with your colleagues inside the organization, your peer group. Today, whether it's a business where you don't compete with a peer group, I mean, auto manufacturers, which are really finding the going really tough right now, are competing with, an organization like Dyson, which used to make vacuum cleaners. That's what they were best known for. And they are now making electric vehicles. And so the nature of competition is not going to come from your peer group. In the same way, for an individual, the competition is not going to come from the peer group. It is going to come from somebody entirely different. And it could be an individual who's anywhere in the world, or it could be organizations. There are these small groups of organizations, large, the big four. Everyone competes for the same kind of job. So it's no longer that, if you're a one person player, you do, a certain kind of job, you do the odd job here and there. There are experts who actually do exactly the same kind of work that a large consulting firm can offer. And, so the models of competition, even for individuals, has changed. And that's probably the first time in human history that's happened.
That is also making it difficult for the buying organization, right? So the organization which is looking for example, your expertise,
right,
can also get that same expertise, say, from a big four.
Yeah.
So for them, the challenge is also multifold, right? Should they come to you or should they go to them? And what do you see happening there?
So it is going to be, I think the importance of the brand becomes very important if the if the individual has to compete with a larger organization, the larger organizations spend so much of time and energy in their marketing team. They are creating the brand persona and all of that, whereas most individuals really do not put that kind of a sustained effort, I would say, in building their brand. So, for the individual, the reputation, if many people have an adverse reaction to the word personal brand, but I would say that think about it as your reputation. That really becomes really significant. It's not what you say, it's what the others say about you. I think the when you have abundance of choice, and in this case, the buyer really has to rely on the reputation of the individual
Right.
or the brand of the organization, and both become very significant. And in the process, when you have several competing brands, you actually begin to see the rise of influencers, people who can help you make sense of the choices. So the importance of influencers actually making those kind of choices for the buyer is going to increase a lot. And the influencer's role is going to become more and more central. So today, again, you see there are, in many of these mergers and acquisitions, you actually see that there are advisors. There are these well-known firms which become advisors and they sort of broker the deal. That is actually going to happen much more in all kinds of work at all levels of work. So I would see that the role of the influencer is going to become very significant.
And that also brings to the other side, this whole rise of influencers were because of the democratization of media, right?
Sure.
So that also, the ability to build a personal brand was never as feasible as it is today. That's also part of the same shift.
Let's take a short break. When we come back, we will hear Abhijit's view on how the ability to build the personal brand, the rise of the influencers through democratization of media indicates a major shift.
You are listening to a Show How To audio original. Podcasting is one of the fastest growing content marketing avenues today. We can help you exploit this largely untapped marketing opportunity. We can craft your audio strategy and leverage the wide reach and easy streaming capability that smartphone penetration provides. It is powerful and personal. Talk to us to find out how podcasting can help you build your brand and reach out to target audiences.
Welcome back. Before the break, I asked Abhijit how the rise of the influencers and the ability to build a personal brand signals a major shift. Let's listen in.
I fully agree with you. I mean, the whole notion of the role of the leader, one of the variables that people never had to think about was the media, which was there, because your communication was really very, very sanitized. You were communicating largely internally to the employees. And you sort of, it was episodic. You would connect with them periodically and you would it was one-sided, maybe, the odd question answer kind of a session, and you are done. And periodically, every quarter, if you're a listed company, you stepped out and spoke to the analysts and you sort of managed that conversation. But today, again, everything has moved from being episodic to being real time. And therefore, whether it's a customer who can sort of really put a question to you on social media, or you have an employee who might pose a question to you, which is uncomfortable, whether it's on a social site or any of these job sites. It can be on LinkedIn. It can be on many of these places. So really the ability to stay tuned, so the ability to do social listening, stay relevant, understand what is happening, and be comfortable saying, I don't know, which, in the past, the leader is never, rarely had to say, I really don't know, because there was enough time for them to do the homework and sort of do this. But today, when you are responding in real time and authenticity matters a whole lot, then I think it's expected that if you really don't know the answer, you would say so and then get back. So I think the style of leadership has evolved a lot thanks to the media. And with everybody having a cell phone, everyone is actually a broadcaster. So, it's the same thing that which I mentioned earlier. You compete for attention from the best news producers of the world. So an individual competes with a CNN or BBC or Al Jazeera, whatever you listen to. So that is a real huge shift, and it's an opportunity. So you get lots of alternative views and voices, but at the same time, your credibility becomes that much more important. So the pattern is really the same.
So that brings us to the gig economy, right? So these individuals, rise of the individuals, and sort of decentralization of individuals. The fact that hyper connectivity allowed people to work from anywhere, which means now you have a remote distributed team, and the associated challenges and positives, also gave rise to this whole new gig workforce. How do you see that impacting the future of the individual as a part of the workforce?
So I think I sort of take a step back and say what it means to the organizations is that a lot of the talent that you are looking at is not necessarily on your role. So I think that's an area where people will need to sort of build their skills. How do you work with people who are sort of doing the work remotely? You can't monitor them, you can't manage them. It's a loss of control for the organization. It's a loss of control for the buyer. Once you decide to hand over the work, you really give up control over that, and you can't really monitor. So the way of managing performance, it's a new skill which is going to be become very important. And whether it is your own workforce which is going to work because of flexible working timings and opportunities and work from home and remote working and all of that. And on the other hand, you will have the rise of many new categories of people. You have the digital nomads. I mean, in the more recent times, I have written about, the digital nomads and the way they are working, real-time cases. And, there are enough organizations, the largest organizations are working with them. And so therefore, that is a new category. The way millennials work, the way Generation Z works, all of that is going to be completely different. So there are many new categories. They work at different times, they work in different places, they work in different ways. And just because they are connected, it is possible to take work from all these people and stitch it together. So it is pretty much like, what people do in movie making. They take different scenes that they have shot in different places. One could be the scene in a indoor setting, the other could be an outdoor setting, and the third one could be underwater. You actually, for the purpose of the narration, you actually take all these three pieces of film and piece it together for the common narrative. I think the role of the organization is going to be to build the narrative, and the providers will be shooting the different scenes in different places. So that is going to be a very interesting model for work. And I think this is still evolving, but our benchmarks will change. And benchmarks are no longer going to be other organizations, so it's not going to be the organizations that we are used to benchmarking and saying that, okay, I'm from this particular industry, so I will benchmark another competing peer. But you will probably start benchmarking the creative fields. And that's something that I see happening, that most creative roles are all gig roles. So there is a very large segment of the world which does work on gigs and historically has worked on gigs. So it's only that now that this term is coming into vogue, but most creative fields have lived and worked with gig workers always.
Yeah, so it was not sort of at scale. I guess that's the difference. And the other thing that I think is making the difference is the millennials in the workforce, because their attitude towards work is significantly different from say our generation or even Generation Z, because these guys are not interested in long term loyalty kind of scenarios. They are not interested in ownership, so their need for money is different. So they are dictating a lot of these changes and the rapidity of the shift, I guess.
Yes, of course. I think first of all, you see everywhere, the worker is becoming a lot more important. And as the nature of the work becomes more skewed towards, creative work, you will see more and more that the tilt is going to be in favor of the worker. um, we have seen that for the biggest of the firms, whether it is, Facebook or Google or Microsoft and all of that, the workers have actually, walked out in protest when they have disagreed with a policy, or they're sort of forcing them to give up or accept a particular kind of a contract. So those kind of things are already happening. But I also agree that, when you suddenly have people who are not looking to build a career with you, I mean, their notion is of work is really a lot more um, episodic. The terms that they are looking at is far shorter, and they are looking at a variety of experiences. And if you can't provide that, they will look elsewhere. And I think what has really made that happen is in the previous, couple of years, employers, while they have talked about, the need for engaging the workforce, but yet when there is a business downturn, and sometimes, inevitably, they've had to let go of people. And sort of in some sense, it has broken that contract, which was an emotional contract that, it used to be pretty much that, the unless the employee decided to quit, and by and large, unless you are a poor performer, most organizations would, try to retain the people. But now it is, a lot more about performance. It's a lot more transactional. You don't sort of perform for a couple of quarters and, company lets you go. But more importantly, the unpredictability of the business downturns, and then suddenly, people are letting go of large workforces. You see what's happening in the automobile industry right now, or many of the other sectors, whether it's telecom or anything else. The pattern is the same. So, if there is no trust, engagement is going to be harder, and the nature of the equation is going to be very transactional. So I think that is a very significant shift in terms of managing somebody whose equation with you is really transactional. It's really going to be a lot like what you see with the ride sharing driver. People are nice, in that short equation, because both people rate each other, but it's a very short kind of a interaction. So there are many different shifts in the equation between the employer and the employee, and in many ways in which rewards, recognition, and the whole HR processes will need to get reimagined because of the shifts that we see.
Okay, so you mentioned this that HR has fundamentally changed, and one of the thoughts that I have while I have been doing these discussions is that should you at all call it HR anymore? I mean, does it make sense? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so in many fields, when you sort of really drive a change at some point of time, you start sometimes by changing the title. At a point of time, HR itself, you sort of look at the change. At one point of time, it was called, the person, we had one person who managed the payroll, and it was called the welfare officer. And, if you look at the origins before the Factories Act at least came into place in India, if you sort of look at that. And then after that, there was this whole thing of personal manager. That was the real term that was used, because they were personnel and you managed them. And then this whole thing of, working on the human resource side of it. And the whole view was human being is a resource, and why not, treat them like that. And then there was another shift which said that, resource is a very transactional flavor, and, land is a resource, money is a resource, human being is not a resource. And you're looking at talent. So there was talent management. So things will evolve, regardless of what the designation or terminology is there. Somebody will come up with a field, and there are already companies which call it many different things. I mean, you have chief happiness officer, you have chief empathy officer, all kinds of terms. And while the way things change in the world of work is that a lot of change happens outside of organizations, and it happens in a manner which is closer to play rather than to serious work. So you will see even the way a lot of AR, VR technology evolved was that you created games and little things that people played with on their mobile. And suddenly you see that that has taught people how to use AR for solving real world business problems. So the model is the same. I mean, today you might laugh at somebody's designation and say, okay, that's just a fanciful designation. But at some point of time, it is probably going to be, indicative of the shift that will happen. And we have to sort of wait and see. And I don't think we have to wait too long, because the focus on what people are looking at is less about productivity. It's going to be more about innovation. It's going to be more about creativity and finding that. So, yes, I mean, ideas travel faster than reality. So there will be a lag time. There will be a time when, people will say, okay, it's just a fancy designation. Nothing has changed. But, this is precisely where change happens, because the person with that new role sometimes has a new canvas with which to reimagine the role. And then, things change. So I am very hopeful that it is going to evolve to something which is potentially going to look at something different.
Can you share any example where you see organization focused on their people and ensuring that they have put systems or processes or plans in place to keep them relevant for the future, and thereby keeping the organization itself relevant for the future?
I have, in the more recent times in India, I've been very impressed with the work that has been done by Genpact. They've really figured out a way to do, the reskilling of a very, very large global workforce of 90,000 people. And the way they've done it has been fairly unique. Now, how successful they are, and the impact of this kind of continuous shift on the workforce has to be seen. But I definitely think that they've made the attempt to create something which is not cut and paste from somewhere. They've actually leveraged existing experts. They've created their systems. They've got an algorithm to sort out the network, identify the experts who are there, and use those experts to create content which supplements what they have already on many of these learning platforms. It's a really, really interesting case study. I'm actually writing about it. And I think it's a lovely example for people to think about.
And how has been the response from their workforce themselves?
It's been really great, because, they've done a few things which are different, which is, it's not mandatory training or anything of that sort. People are expected to do it, but it's reinforced. It's run by the business. The people agenda is co-owned by the business. That makes a lot of difference. And they've sort of really said that, it's bite-sized, it's in real time. They've done a lot of things which are there. People are creating content, which is as they are going through their real day-to-day work. So, what normally happens is that a lot of people believe that if you've given the employees access to tons of content, then that should pretty much take care of the reskilling. It never happens like that.
Right.
You have to contextualize it. I think that's the big shift that I see them having made.
TalentWise is brought to you by Knowledge Bridge. We produce customized and multilingual visual training content. We have worked on complex processes, products, and skills development for large blue chip brands such as Tata Motors, Mahindra First Choice, Homelane, Epson, Toyota, Citibank, and Consol Neowatt, serving diverse industries. Talk to us for your next custom content requirement and be pleasantly surprised. Call us on 99021 631 32.
Wonderful. Thank you, Abhijit, for your time. I really appreciate, and I hope that I'll be able to get you back in the next season.
I hope that you are going to invite me back. I'm going to count on that, and hopefully by then I will have my next book ready and we can talk about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All the best.
Thank you so very much for having me here. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Coming up next week, another exciting new chat with Arun Muthukumar, CEO and co-founder, Link Street.
For any business, I guess customer is the most important thing. And today, customer experience is the big buzzword, CX as they call it. The question of, why should a customer walk into a store if they can go buy things online? The reason they come in is because the sales associate in the store can really help them make an informed decision make them understand what are all the different options that are available, which option is the most relevant and applicable to them, so that at the end of the day, after buying the product, they're extremely happy and are likely to come and buy again or refer to other customers. So that means the need is that the salesperson, unlike earlier days, he's no more somebody who just picks the size and color or does the billing, but the expectation is that the sales person is more of a consultant and an advisor. To satisfy the customer, the salesperson has to be their advisor / trusted sort of a consultant, and for that person to reach that level of knowledge and to provide that level of customer service, you know, there's crazy amount of training that is required. And particularly if you're talking about soft skills, it has to be drilled over and over again over a period of time. Clearly 1 day, 2 day training is not going to be sufficient. Even something like not knowing say the return and exchange process can either mess up and become costly for the company, or can result in a very angry, upset customer. These are all very critical things that every employee absolutely has to know and follow, so they understand and eventually learn and master both the soft skill aspects and the hard skills like product knowledge and process related things.
Thank you for being with us today on TalentWise. We hope we helped you focus on some actionable ideas today. It was certainly enlightening for us. We hope to see you again on our next episode. If you liked what you heard, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast platforms like iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts from, and give us a rating while you're at it. Thank you in advance. This Show How To Original podcast is produced for KnowledgeBridge, the multilingual visual training platform and custom training content creators, by Show How To Audio. Hosted by Shubhanjan Sarkar and produced by Rajiv Aditya. See you next time.